The Chief Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court has waded into the controversy over a short film about atrocities alleged to have been carried out by the Lord's Resistance Army and its leader, Joseph Kony. Luis Moreno Ocampo says the video, which has become an overnight internet sensation, can only help efforts to end impunity for suspected war criminals. Well, in a minute, we'll be discussing the impact the video's had in the week since it hit the Twittersphere, for good and for bad. But first, this report by Anna Holligan.
An unprecedented social media campaign designed, they say, to help catch one of the world's most wanted fugitives. The video's now had more than 80 million views, with the makers harnessing the power of Facebook and Twitter to connect with international audiences. But there are now almost as many critics as there are celebrities tweeting about it. The chief prosecutor, though, who also features in the film, thinks the world should be celebrating this online movement rather than criticising it.
Criticism is stupid. These white kids are spending their time to protect kids of their age in Africa. They are role models, not to be criticized. Come on, what is this? Criticize this because they are worried about killings? That's good.
Some bloggers in Uganda have been critical of the campaign to make Kony famous, which they say is patronising to the people in the country who are already well aware of the rebel leader's existence. Others are now hoping the country will take advantage of the increased attention.
Back in the village, if there is a season of drought and suddenly it starts raining, sometimes, yes, the rain will destroy crops and rivers will flood, but you also try to collect the rainwater, and if you can store it, you can put it to use. And I wonder, in this case, this flood of interest, what can we do with it?
It's here at the ICC that Joseph Kony is wanted for alleged war crimes. He's accused of kidnapping children and using them as soldiers and sex slaves in his rebel army. So far, he's managed to evade international justice. The movie makers believe they can help and are refusing to let the critics deter them.
Haters are going to hate, they just are, but when you do your fact checks, you will find out that this is a new world. It's an old paradigm that they're referencing. This, like, you can't do this, you can't do this, you're not allowed to do this, but we are.
What the Kony 2012 campaign has done is show how to communicate a basic message to inspire mass action, or at least attention. The true test of this unconventional approach to ending impunity for the world's most wanted war crime suspects can only really be judged in the real world rather than the virtual one. Anna Holligan, BBC News, The Hague.
Well, let's discuss the various merits of Kony 2012. Let's go to Washington. We can speak to Sarah Margan, Associate Director of the Sustainable Security and Peacebuilding Initiative at the Centre for American Progress. In London, alongside me, Musa Okwonga, a football writer, blogger, poet, musician of Ugandan descent. Thank you both. Sarah, if I can come to you first of all, for good or for bad, this has put Joseph Kony's name right out there on the world map, hasn't it?
It certainly has, and I think it's probably far exceeded even their highest hopes of how many people would be talking about the LRA and Joseph Kony.
But there do seem to be a few errors in terms of the facts as they're portraying them. Certainly the LRA doesn't seem to be the threat that it was maybe 6, 7 years ago. Does that matter?
I think it does matter in terms of the information that you share with your activists and in creating a movement that is well informed. That's very important. In terms of next steps, there are certainly opportunities to correct those, what I call corner cutting and shortcuts that have been taken.
Musa Okwonga, what do you make of this? Obviously, you are of Ugandan descent. You've seen this several times. What are your thoughts about the whole process of the way this has been done and the fact that a few errors are contained in that video as well?
Well, first of all, my parents are from the region where children have been abducted from, so I'm very happy the issue's been raised, albeit belatedly. That's fantastic. I did feel there were some crucial simplifications in the video, but I think we can look past those to an extent. I think the real thing is looking now at what's gone wrong before, some fantastic critiques made by people such as Jane Bussman, and using those and incorporating those into the next strategy. I think that's really important.
I mean, some people would argue that this might make it even more difficult to arrest Joseph Kony now that he knows attention is on him. Do you buy that argument? Does that hold water?
Not necessarily. I think, if he's evaded the Ugandan government for 26 years, he's clearly got, tricks up his sleeve. I think the question really is how did he use those tricks, and were they that strategic before? And I think we must learn from mistakes made before if we're going to make progress.
Sarah Margan, I mean, other people, other critics have said that this smacks of colonialism. It takes a young film maker, his very photogenic young son, and look, the Americans can go in and solve all the problems of Africa.
You know, I think I understand the complaints and criticisms that a lot of people have made, and I think there's legitimacy to them. But look at the targets of this audience. It's predominantly young Americans who have not, unfortunately, heard about the conflict. I'm going to agree with Musa and his point. It's wonderful to see this issue being talked about by so many people who didn't know about its existence before, particularly for those of us who have been working on it or affected by it for a long, long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. My daughter, who's 15, tweeted this to me a few days ago and said, you know, why aren't we doing this on the news? And I had to say, well, actually, we have been doing it for years. It's just not the story that it once was. And that is the target generation. But is there a naivety, do you think, here, Musa, about what realistically can be done? You know, there's this big groundswell, but what realistically are they going to achieve?
Well, I don't think Invisible Children are naive, actually. Certainly not that. I think they're very well informed. I think the big concern they're going to have moving forward, actually, is coordinating very effectively with civil society organisations in Uganda, I think, who feel slightly maligned by a lot of this. I've been looking recently, there's so much, there's a great groundswell of anger, I think, among people in Uganda. They feel this effort hasn't been coordinated yet. So I think going forward, there's opportunities. They've really got to think carefully about working with them on the ground to get this done.
From what I can remember of the video as well, there doesn't seem to be any mention of Museveni in this at all. Is that the case? And I just wonder what pressure should be put on him to actually sort of target Joseph Kony.
Well, I think it's a very valid point. I mean, Museveni, you know, has been evaded for 26 years by somebody and in the field of battle, and Museveni himself came to power, you know, through military means. So he's clearly not a fool when it comes to generalship. So I think the question really is, what did you do wrong in the last 26 years, and what could be done to address that going forward? And I think that's the key question.
And Sarah, the celebrity endorsement of this as well, do you think this will give it the momentum it needs to actually bring about some sort of change here?
I think we see, at least in the United States, significant momentum from celebrity engagement. But again, it comes back to what's next. Where do we go with this? Exactly the point of how do we engage international partners, regional actors, and the very important groups that have been working on the ground for a long, long time.
And so what would your advice be then to the organisers of this campaign? And it must be said, I mean, there are question marks about Invisible Children as an organisation. The fact it doesn't have a great deal of sort of transparency. It also seems to be paying its staff large salaries. But does that muddy the water a little or not?
I think in the case of Invisible Children, they have never claimed to be solely a humanitarian organization. They do some impressive and innovative work on the ground in terms of creating an early warning network. But they also are an advocacy organization. And so if they're going to pay for a high-level filmmaker to get the message out there, I guess that's their choice to do that. But you know, they need to get out there and talk to the millions of people that are now listening to them about what they need to do, who they need to contact in the U.S. government or elsewhere to start moving the different levers.
Musa, just a final thought from you. Despite all the issues, the problems you have with this, generally you think this is a good thing. And do you think this is maybe the way that other filmmakers might now, or other journalists and activists and NGOs, might be able to highlight other international issues like this, which the public really just don't know enough about?
I'm a huge fan of using social media to tell stories. You look at Syria, you look at Bahrain. It's been fantastic for activists on the ground there. So broadly speaking, I think that it's a great medium to use.
All right, OK. Musa Okwonga and Sarah Margan in Washington, thank you both very much indeed for joining us on the programme.